So you mentioned Sharjah as well. And where does Abu Dhabi fit? So these three Emirates, how do you, if I just ask you to just summarize in short, how do you think they differ?
How
And
do they differ? Yeah.
yeah, and what
Okay.
would be some examples?
Yeah. So I think like I've said, Dubai is a city that's more pragmatic. It's more driven by its economics. It's just something that is constantly trying to reinvent itself to make money. In some sense.
That's the function.
Yeah.
When you say form follows function, this is a warped idea of it.
Yes.
Their function is to create something that's
It's to constantly kind of generate interest and generate kind of investment and things like that. Sharjah, on the other hand, is a city that is doesn't. For one, I think it doesn't have this kind of global ambition, like Dubai. Dubai really sees itself as a city that's in line with Singapore and Hong Kong and London. It's a global city. Whereas Sharjah is a city that is more kind of everyday. And also the vision for the city given by the Sheikh of Sharjah is quite evident in its urban fabric. So if you go to Sharjah, you see these government buildings that all look kind of in a certain aesthetic. They have these kind of Islamic classical features. They always have a certain scale. They have a certain presence.
Is there a name for that style?
That style, that is really not a particular style. It's a mix of many styles, but you could say that it's kind of a government style of architecture that they have invented for themselves. But of course, the elements come from different places. Like there are elements that come from Cairo, from the Fatimid time period, from Andalusia, that's the southern Spain. So there's a mix of kind of Islamic styles that are put together to create this kind of buildings that look, in some sense, very elegant, very royal, you could say. So they also have a certain scale. And the city otherwise has a quite a systematic approach to planning, so everything's on a grid.
Sharjah?
Yeah. I mean, at least the older parts of the city. It's based on a very simple grid. Of course, the grid modifies near the lagoons. So, but otherwise, it's quite systematic. And in terms of its new architecture, I think Sharjah has some of the best new buildings in UAE, in my opinion.
University City, I really like that area. Is that new?
University City is new. It's not something that I'm particularly fond of because, again, it follows this kind of architecture that the government uses.
Government style.
The government style.
Yeah.
I don't think that's really a style. It's just a way of me explaining it.
Yeah.
The challenge with the university city for me is that it has it's a bit of scale problem. It's like everything's so far apart. You can't really walk between the buildings. Yes. It's not considering that you have a lot of young people there. It was a good opportunity to create a very vibrant kind of space, in between the buildings, and to create a very kind of interesting culture around it. But it became kind of showpieces that are,
academic city is the same, I imagine.
Yeah, but the academic city is, in that sense, is never really trying to be one campus, right? It's a bunch of different campuses. So there was never really an attempt to get them to kind of mix. Whereas the university city in Sharjah is really one big project, but the design of it doesn't allow it to feel like a
campus.
Yeah, doesn't make it feel like a campus. But in terms of the new buildings, I'm saying is that most of the new buildings that I find exciting in Sharjah are actually very small. I don't know if you've been to the Sharjah Art Foundation. There's a bunch of spaces that the Sharjah Art Foundation runs in this part of the city that they call the heart of Sharjah. So it's kind of like the old part of Sharjah. And within the footprint of old existing kind of courtyard houses, they have inserted these white kind of gallery museum spaces.
That's what the rain room is as well, right?
It's very close to that, in that area. And I think that's very interesting because there is not just an appreciation of the old, but there's also an attempt to try and find a new language, to do something that is not just mimicking the past. In Dubai, the challenge is whenever we have something to do with the past, we end up kind of making copies. Like if you think of the new Al Seef, the new Al Seef like now looks more old than the actual old, which I
Yes.
find kind of problematic.
It's a confusing feeling, right?
Yeah, it's a confusing feeling also
Yeah.
because they market it as the old city.
Yes.
The old city just opened last year,
Yeah.
so it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Then there's a bunch of small kind of museum and other cultural facilities in Sharjah, which I find very interesting. Like I think you've been to the Maliha Archaeology
Yes.
Center. Yeah,
Yeah.
that for another example of a new building that looks back at the past but does it in a completely new way. I think those are quite interesting. Now coming to Abu Dhabi. Now Abu Dhabi has a different problem altogether, or a different challenge. The challenge is that Abu Dhabi is the capital city, and the
Right.
capital city always has an element of representation as its challenge. That it is constantly trying to find what the identity of the country is. So if you think about it, like when they designed the Sheikh Zayed Mosque, it was not just a big mosque for Abu Dhabi, but it was the national mosque of UAE. So what does that mean? What does that? So this is another layer of architecture that in Dubai we are not so concerned about. In some sense, you can make the nicest, like you can do anything. You don't really have to be. You don't have to really think about where it is, in the sense that you are not bound by the questions of identity as much as you are in Abu Dhabi.
Can we just explore that for a moment?
Okay.
Don't you think Dubai is kind of a pseudo capital because more people know of Dubai than Abu
Yes,
Dhabi?
it is. But if you think of Dubai's architecture, it doesn't really conjure a particular image in your mind. Like you could think of any kind of building and imagine it to be in Dubai.
Right. It doesn't. So if I look at Dubai, I'm not thinking of UAE. I'm
Yes.
thinking of futuristic.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
So I'm thinking of a city that is the future, basically.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the right way to think about it.
I see.
So whether it is particularly in Dubai, or it's in Hong Kong, or it's in London, you don't really think about that when you're thinking of a building in Dubai. Like if you think of the Burj Khalifa, is it it's I think a wonderful building, but it doesn't necessarily talk so much about the identity of this city or this region as a. I mean, it has become that, but it was not the challenge of it.